And happy Father's Day. And I'm here with a very special guest, my dad, a retired Navy man, master mechanic, and the world's oldest Aqua Teen Hunger Force fan.
Yeah, that would be me.
Yeah, there's no camera. You gotta talk into the. Nobody can see you here.
That's when we do our best work.
All right. Got little notes on what I wanted to bring up. Okay, so the story everyone wants to hear that I mentioned on the live streams, and everyone's like, "Oh, I want to," and your celly's blowing up right in the middle. That's. Eh. Yep. I'll edit that out unless I'm too lazy. 50-50 shot on that.
Surprise, surprise.
All right, so you were stationed in Antarctica.
Yes, I had the honor and the privilege of, I guess you call it that. Well, no, first went in the Navy at 18. Wanted to go to Vietnam, and luckily God saved me from that catastrophe. So the next silly location I chose was Antarctica. Operation Deep Freeze was what it was called, where the logistic support for the National Science Foundation. In other words, we the guys that, plowed the roads and kept the lights on and kept the shitters from getting too full while the scientists went off and did their thing. So going there at that age, you don't realize just how cool it was going to be. But yes, it was a fabulous experience that I've enjoyed talking about over the years.
So as we all know, Antarctica is the ring around the flat Earth.
Yes,
so you were in on the flat Earth because
flat Earth.
I would have thought they would have paid you more to keep quiet about seeing the edge there.
Well, one of the great things we said about Antarctica was that it had no gravity. The place just sucked. So maybe.
Well, you had been down to the magnetic North Pole where the compass just spins, right?
South Pole.
South Pole. Yeah, South Pole.
Yes. I went out to the pole station one time on a detachment. Again, I was lucky enough to get out there. You don't think of how cool these things are going to be when you're first doing them. Actually, I didn't even want to go, but a good friend of mine volunteered the both of us. So we ended up out there for a couple of weeks, and it was great to have been able to say, yeah, I was there, I did that.
So the reason the Navy was down there, if I'm understanding, this was the 70s, right?
Yes.
So we had scientists down there. So, of course, the Russians had scientists down there.
Right.
Because, be damned if the Soviet Union would understand more about penguin mating cycles than we would.
Yes, the Antarctica at that time was under what they called a international treaty. There were 20-some countries. I'll have to check the history books on this, and everybody was there, and it was this, perestroika. Everybody was friends and buddies. But the Russians used military support for their scientists, so the U.S. thought that was a good idea too. So yeah, the military had its fingers in the pie. That has since went away. As a matter of fact, as of 97, 98, it was completely turned over to civilian contractors, both by the Soviets and the U.S. So there is no military there now.
Well, as I understand it, you and your buddies almost started World War III down there, screwing around with
the famous beer story. Yeah, that's Budweiser, the king of beers, the great American beer. We had a supply of that, several pallet loads of it, and unfortunately it had been frozen numerous times. The cans were bulging, and it was, the doctor had tested some of it and said, well, it won't kill you, but it'll sure as hell give you the shits. So, but what we would do is pop the top on these things. It had separated. All the yeast and fermentation went to the bottom, and you had about a half an inch of pure alcohol floating on the top. So we'd carefully open the can, sip off that little bit off the top, and throw the rest of it away. And one day, lo and behold, the Russians came to visit us, And, how it came about, I don't know. We ended up with one of their supply keepers up at our warehouse, and we were moving some things around, and they noticed these Budweiser cans, and they just jumped right on that. Oh my goodness, you have that famous American beer, Budweiser, greatest thing since sliced bread. Can we have, get that? They wanted to buy it, trade, whatever. And they had some vodka, which pretty much tasted like gasoline. I believe it was made from potatoes. I've since had good vodka in my life and realized that just how bad Russian vodka is.
They make it from turnips and sorrow.
I guess, yeah, that's the joke. But anyway, so the enlisted guys, we swapped with their enlisted guys. We swapped these cases of beer, pallets of beer, for the vodka, and they loaded it on their plane and took back off. Their station down there was called Vostok, and they go home, and then our commanding officer finds out that giving the Russians this bad beer. He's like, "Oh my God, if you doesn't kill them, you're gonna start a war." Well, lo and behold, they radioed back to us a couple of days later that they loved it. We now know why you Americans rave about Budweiser. Yes, can we come get the rest of it? So the rest of it we actually sold to them.
I have to imagine when the wall fell, those guys bought some Budweiser first. They're like, this new formula sucks.
Yeah, but God knows what Russian beer was back then, or even is now. But so that was an interesting story. Yeah, when they wanted the rest of it, then we decided we'd sell it to them.
Well, why not?
Because we capitalists, that's why.
So, as we mentioned, they were down there doing all their science stuff. And you and your boys, as I understand it, decided to do your own experiments with the penguins.
Yeah, I'm not proud of that, animal abuse or whatever.
But this is barely animal. This is more just teasing it.
Tease them. Young kids are young kids. We were 18, 19-year-old men, boys, whatever you want to call it, and we were fascinated by the penguins, and they are marvelous creatures. If you ever get to study them, they're as fascinating as they appear. And the scientists had a couple of these birds that they had caught and were keeping in cages right near the edge of town, and we would go mess with the penguins, play with them, and do bad things. I think the story you're leaning towards is the one time we got a pretty big emperor. He was a good 3.5 feet tall. He was a big bird, because it took a couple guys to carry him, and we took him into our club, our little bar. Well, it's so cold down there, and they're used to that. They're born in the ice. They live their life in the ice. They die in the ice. It's all they know. And while our buildings were not warm per se, they were about 50, 55 degrees, maybe 58 degrees Fahrenheit. But it was, it was like putting the bird on the sun. So we got him in the bar, and then we let him loose in there. Well, he couldn't stand the heat. He couldn't stand the commotion. He didn't like being around people. So he proceeded to just run amok, finally getting up on the bar and doing what birds do when they're nervous. He pooped his way from one end of the bar to the other, got down screaming and squawking as they do, and rushed for the door, and we let him out. And lo and behold, this bird ran maybe 20, 25 feet away from us, turned around, and proceeded to just cuss us out in Penguin. He squawked and squealed and shook his flippers at us. I'm sure he was calling us every bad name there is in the Penguin language. And off he went. So we had to clean up and explain what happened to one of the birds. But
one of the penguins got in here somehow.
Yeah, it was a terrible accident. We don't know how it happened, but if you would sit quietly out on and just sit down with your legs crossed like Indian style, just sit there so that you're about eye height to them, and give them about 10, 15 minutes. They will actually come up to you and nudge up to you and what are you? Who are you? Do I know you? Can we be friends? They had no natural fear of man. Maybe they do now. This was 40 years ago. But yes, they're fascinating creatures. They're flock creatures. They live in a flock, and they like buddying up. They buddy up for everything from camaraderie to warmth. And yeah, so it was neat. If you would take the time to enjoy them, you could have a wonderful experience with them.
Well, the last big Antarctica story that I want you to tell, and this is the major, this is the less than fun one, is the accident you had out there.
Oh yes, mortality at the age of 19. I had an accident, and everything about it was wrong. I had done things. I was where I did not belong. No one knew where I was. I found myself in real trouble. We were getting ready to take our Christmas break and, have quote unquote a day off of raucous debauchery. And lo and behold, I had goofed off to the point where one more fuel tanker load of jet fuel had to be taken out to the runway. So I quickly hooked up the 5,000 gallon tanker, which is basically like you see a tanker truck on the roads today, but it was mounted on skis instead of wheels, and we pulled it with a bulldozer instead of a regular truck tractor. So I loaded her up, hooked her up, and I took off for the ice runway, which was about 7 miles away from McMurdo Station, and got out there and got the fuel unloaded and was up on top securing the hatches and folding up the hoses and that sort of stuff, when a big gust of wind blew me off the thing backwards, and I fell about 20 feet and landed across the metal ski. Fortunately, the ski was sunk into the snow somewhat, and I was heavily wrapped in clothing, but it broke my L234 lower vertebrae, and temporarily, I was paralyzed. I couldn't move my legs. I couldn't move at all. And at first, at 19 years old, you think, well, shit, this is inconvenient. And then it begins to dawn on you as you begin to get cold and the snow was blowing across my face that, I may have really screwed up here. They don't know where I am. By the time they figure out I'm missing, I might be a popsicle. So that thought crosses through your mind. And then the other thought that then comes into your mind is, well, I need to do something about this. So a lot of this story has been told to me after the fact, because a lot of it I didn't remember. I was, I guess, passed out or blanked out for some of it. But I got myself rolled over and used my elbows to crawl from the tanker truck over to the bulldozer. And I don't know how this worked. This is between God and he has yet to tell me. But somehow I made a radio call back to the base. The guy that was on the radio dispatch that day has swore that, yes, he heard my voice call in that this was, ice runway to base ops. I need help. I don't remember making that radio call. And if I did make that radio call, why would I have then gotten back out of the bulldozer's cab? There was a minimum amount of heat in there and some shelter, but they found me beside the bulldozer when they eventually got to me and got me wrapped up and then with a lot of pain pills and a lot of Jack Daniels. I got medevac, which is what they call medical evacuation. They took me out to New Zealand, which was our forward base in Christchurch, New Zealand. Beautiful. There'll be more stories about that to come. And then on back home to the States for medical treatment. And at 19, it heals up reasonably well. I was young and healthy and skinny, of which I'm none of those things anymore. But yeah, my back, it always was, you have to watch it. But I think 80% of Americans have back problems. So I'm not unique there. But that is the day that mortality became a realization in my life that, yeah, you not only will die someday, you can die. It will happen. And if you're not careful, it can come sooner than you want. So, and it was beginning of a bit of a religious experience too. I don't think I ever made that radio call. I don't remember it, and I don't see how I could have crawled up into the bulldozer cab. And again, the other thing, having made it that far, why wouldn't I have stayed in the cab? So we let that story just lay, and everybody can make their own judgment call there. But yeah, so I had quite the adventures in Antarctica. It was amazing, and it was at a time in my life when, well, it was marvelous to be young.
Well, those are your three biggest stories for Antarctica that I wanted you to share. So, thanks for taking the time to hop on my little channel here.
Oh, absolutely. We'll get together and do it again.
All right. Well, folks, thanks for listening. I hope you all have a great Father's Day. That's all I got. Bechtloff out.